There is a quiet revolution that begins before the world opens its eyes, and it does not start with grand speeches or dramatic awakenings. It begins in silence. It begins in solitude. It begins in the first breath you take when the alarm rings, and you must decide not what the world demands from you, but what you will choose to be within it. The tragedy of most lives is not failure, but forgetfulness. We forget that we are here for a fleeting blink, that each morning is a new roll of the dice. And yet so, many greet the day like passengers without a destination, drifting from moment to moment, from habit to habit, from thought to thought, without any clear relationship to the rhythm of their own being. To wake up with purpose is not to attach to yourself to some lofty ambition, or to pressure yourself into ceaseless productivity. No, it is something far more sacred. It is to meet the morning with reverence, with clarity, with the understanding that time is not merely a ticking clock, but a living current, and that every moment wasted is not only a loss of time, but a loss of presence of awareness of life itself. The modern mind is trained to believe that significance must come dressed in achievement, but real purpose begins with attention, the kind of attention that feels like love, not to others necessarily, but to your own unfolding, to that fragile movement between sleep and awakening, where you reclaim your agency, where you remember that you are not a leaf caught in the wind, but the wind itself flowing, shaping, touching everything. It is the absence of this purpose that creates the quiet anxiety so many feel. You see it in the glazed eyes of the commuter, in the restless fingers of the compulsive scroller, in the numbed soul of the one who wakes not to live, but to escape, to drift, to survive, but not to truly be. And that is the most insidious form of suffering, the kind that hides under the surface, never erupting into crisis, but slowly eroding the spirit with every unchosen hour. To stop wasting time is not about filling your calendar. It is about reclaiming your sovereignty, your capacity to decide what this day will mean to you, what energy you will bring, what integrity you will embody, what silence you will protect before the noise begins. Because make no mistake, the noise will come, the expectations, the requests, the messages, and the distractions, all of it swirling around you like a storm, begging for your attention. But if you do not anchor yourself early, you will be taken by the tide, and by nightfall, you will wonder where the day went, and more painfully, you will wonder where you went. So I say, rise, not with haste, but with honor. Take those first minutes, not for the world, but for yourself. Breathe deeply, not to prepare for battle, but to return to awareness. Ask yourself, not what must I do, but what will I build? What will I honor? What will I preserve? You are not merely waking from sleep. You are awakening into yourself again and again. And that awakening is not something to take lightly. The day is not a rehearsal. It is the main event. And every second you neglect to be present for it becomes a moment borrowed from a life you will never get back. Now, you may ask, what does it look like to wake up with purpose? Does it require mantras, schedules, bulletproof plans? No. What it requires is intention, the simple act of turning toward your life with open eyes and saying, I choose this day. I choose how I will meet it. I choose not to wander unconsciously through its hours, but to be deliberate in how I think, how I feel, how I move through space, even how I speak to myself. It is not dramatic, it is not loud, but it is powerful for the world. Will always try to choose for you, but purpose is your quiet rebellion, your refusal, to drift your declaration that even in the ordinary you will be awake. Because the awakened life is not about chasing meaning, it is about becoming meaning. So tomorrow, when the light first touches your room, when the stillness greets you, before the world begins, do not reach for your phone. Do not rush to fulfill someone else's agenda. Instead, ask yourself, am I awake or am I simply up? Because the difference between the two will shape everything that follows. There is a subtle tyranny in the way the world demands your attention before you have even decided who you are for the day. It begins with a ping, a notification, a reminder, and slowly, without resistance, you become a participant in everyone else's life but your own. And so, the most powerful habit is not some grand strategy. It is the quiet discipline of planning your day before the world gets a chance to fragment it. You see, most people do not live. They react. They wake up and drift into a pattern that was not chosen but inherited from yesterday and the day before. And they wonder why nothing changes, why peace feels distant and clarity feels like a myth. But clarity is not absent. It is simply buried beneath noise of urgency. Noise of obligation, noise of everything that pretends to be important but does not serve your evolution planning. Your day is not about control in the rigid sense. It is about liberation from randomness, from the tyranny of reacting without reflection. It is the sacred moment where you say, before I enter the world, I will define the terms of engagement. I will not surrender to chaos. I will meet the day on my own ground. Imagine for a moment what it feels like to enter a day already, knowing what matters already, knowing what you will not do, what you will not give your energy to, what you will protect, not because it is glamorous, but because it is yours, because your life is made of time and your time is not disposable. Most do not protect their time because they do not believe they are worthy of it. And yet your worth is not a question. It is a given. And the act of planning is your way of affirming it. The act of sitting with yourself and asking what must get done today, not what screams the loudest, not what makes you feel busy, but what truly moves the needle of your growth. That is not productivity. That is presence. It is the art of directing your consciousness before it is pulled in every direction. And that direction is what makes all the difference. In the difference between being tired and being fulfilled, between ending the day scattered or centered. When you plan with intention, your life begins to reflect it, not in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet elegance of flow. Your mind no longer runs in circles because it has a path. Your emotions settle because they have structure. Your actions compound because they are focused planning. Your day is like tuning an instrument before a concert. You do not rush into performance without harmony. And yet how often do we rush into life without tuning our intentions? You do not need a planner filled with hours and colors and perfect systems. What you need is a pause, a space, a breath, a question. What truly matters today? What will I honor? What will I release? What will I bring forth from within that shapes this day into something worthy of memory? Most never stop to ask. And so they repeat. They relive the same day dressed in new clothes, unaware that they are stuck in a loop of reaction. But you are here because you have chosen awareness, and awareness demands intention, and intention begins with planning. This is not a business habit, it is a spiritual one, because how you use your time is how you shape your life. And how you shape your life is how you awaken within it. So do not wait for the world to hand you its list. Sit down each morning and hand the world. Yours declare what you will build, what you will protect, what you will not allow to cross the sacred line of your focus. Because you are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be something to yourself first, and from that center, from that grounded clarity, all things flow with more peace, more energy, more depth. Planning is not a burden, it is a gift. It is the small ceremony of declaring that you are not a leaf in the wind, but the one who chooses the wind. So tomorrow, before the world arrives, before the demands pile up, before the noise finds you, sit, breathe, ask, and write. Do not plan to control, but to create. The day is not random. It is raw material, and you are the artist. It is strange how often we speak to ourselves with a voice we would never use on another. We wake with thoughts that strike not with wisdom, but with sharpness, with doubt, with a tone that erodes rather than strengthens, and yet we accept it without question. As if this internal voice were somehow a truth rather than a habit. You must begin to understand that the relationship you have with your own mind is the foundation upon which all your other relationships are built. And if you do not treat yourself with care, with reverence, with dignity, then the world will mirror that tone back to you. The habit of speaking to yourself like someone you respect is not merely self-help. It is the path to inner clarity, to emotional resilience, to spiritual composure. Every thought you permit, every word you repeat becomes a thread in the tapestry of your identity. And so if your inner language is hostile, rushed, impatient, then your identity becomes brittle and fragile. It is no wonder that we lose confidence when the soil we plant it in is poisoned with contempt. If you wish to rewire your mindset, you must first rewire the voice inside, the voice that narrates your life moment by moment, because it is this voice that determines whether you rise or collapse in difficulty, whether you forgive yourself or punish endlessly, whether you believe in your possibility or shrink in shame. So ask yourself gently, who am I when I am alone with my thoughts? Do I offer myself the same kindness I give to others? Do I interrupt my negative loops? Or do I bow to them as if they are gods of truth? Because you see, most people do not realize their mind is not a mirror, it is a projector. It does not simply reflect reality, it creates it. Your self-talk is not a commentary, it is a command. And your subconscious listens not to logic, but to repetition. So when you say, I am not good enough, I always fail, I never get it right, you are not describing your past, you are constructing your future. But here lies the beauty. You can choose to change the tone without needing evidence. You can speak with hope before results, with grace before perfection, with clarity before confidence, because these words are not lies, they are seeds. You do not wait for the fruit to appear before planting the tree. You plant and water and trust. And so it is. With the mind, begin speaking to yourself, not with delusion, but with precision. Instead of, I always mess up, say, I am learning to improve. Instead of, I am broken, say, I am healing. Instead of, I cannot do this, say, I am growing stronger every day. This is not empty affirmation. It is the sacred act of training your inner world to support, rather than sabotage your growth. And if you think this sounds too simple, then ask yourself this: how has the complexity of your criticism served you? Has it lifted you? Has it moved you forward? Or has it simply deepened your weariness? There is no nobility in self-punishment, and there is no strength in cruelty toward the self-true. Strength comes from balance, from honest yet compassionate observation, from the ability to see your own flaws without making them your identity. So begin today, not with an avalanche of change, but with one small shift. When you catch yourself in the spiral of judgment, pause and replace the tone. With respect, you do not need to pretend you are perfect, but you must remember you are in progress, and progress deserves better language. You would not scold a child for falling while learning to walk. You would not mock a friend for struggling through grief. So do not weaponize your words against your own. Becoming the habit of talking to yourself with respect is not easy at first, because the mind resists unfamiliar kindness. But over time, with repetition, it begins to listen and then to believe, and slowly the voice that once tore you down becomes the one that builds you. And when that happens, you are no longer alone in your struggle. You have yourself not as an enemy, but as an ally. And that is where transformation begins, when your inner world is not a battlefield, but a place of refuge. Speak like someone who believes in you. Speak like someone who knows healing, takes time. Speak like someone who trusts that growth, comes in silence, not spectacle. Because if you do, your outer life will begin to reflect the respect you have finally returned to yourself. There comes a moment in every day when the mind begins to hesitate, not with malice, but with a soft, persuasive whisper that says, not now, maybe later, perhaps tomorrow. And in that moment, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold. Your future starts to slip away, not with violence, but with quiet avoidance. Delay is the great thief of transformation, not because it shouts, but because it soothes, it offers comfort, it promises safety, it pretends to be logical and patient, but underneath it is simply resistance in disguise, the habit of taking action when your mind says delay is the practice of reclaiming your power, not in the dramatic choices, but in the invisible ones, the ones that happen in seconds, in silence, when no one else is watching. You see, the mind is not your enemy, but it is a creature of habit, and its habit is to protect. Its habit is to maintain, and survival does not always align with growth. So it resists what is unfamiliar, what is uncertain, what is uncomfortable, and that resistance often appears at the exact edge where change is about to happen when you decide to act, but then hear the voice that says, wait, this is not the right time. You are tired. It might not work. What if it fails? These are not just thoughts. They are the gatekeepers of your next level. And if you listen to them, if you obey them, you stay locked in the loop of intention, without execution, thinking without movement, knowing without becoming. And so the key, the absolute key, is to interrupt that delay with motion, to train yourself to act. Not when you feel ready, but when you feel the resistance arise. Because that resistance is the signal, not the stop sign. It is the call to act, it is the test, and those who pass it do not feel courageous. They simply move. They do not debate or negotiate. They simply step forward, not because they are fearless, but because they have decided that their life will be shaped by action, not by excuses. Action is not about speed, it is about intention. It is about choosing in the next step. Even if the whole path is unclear, it is about building momentum, not by waiting for perfect clarity, but by starting anyway. Because once you begin, clarity often follows the heaviness you felt, begins to lift the fog in your mind, begins to clear, and you realize the thing you were avoiding was not the problem. It was the avoidance itself. Avoidance feeds doubt, while action feeds trust. The more you act, the more you begin to trust yourself, not because every action is successful, but because every action reinforces the truth that you are someone who follows through. And that is what rewires your mindset, the shift from I should to I will, from maybe later to I begin. Now you must understand the mind loves comfort, not because it is weak, but because it evolved to keep you safe. But growth is not safety, growth is exposure to edges, to effort, to the discomfort of expansion. And so you must become the kind of person who moves through resistance, not around it, not past it. But through it, you must feel the hesitation and then act anyway, even if it is small, even if it is imperfect, because the habit of action is not about the size of the step, it is about the commitment to movement. It is about saying yes to the present moment instead of postponing your life to a future that never comes. How many things in your life are still waiting simply because you have delayed them? How many dreams are still ideas? How many conversations still unspoken? How many habits still unformed? Not because you lacked in the ability, but because you obeyed the delay. It is time to stop treating resistance as a reason and start treating it as a reminder that this is the moment that matters. This is the moment where your future is decided, not in some distant place, but here now. When you choose to move, despite the pull to pause, that is when identity shifts. That is when belief builds. That is when life bends toward change. Because action is how you instruct your subconscious that you are serious, that you are no longer governed by fear or comfort or delay, but by the deeper truth that nothing changes until you do. And you change the moment you decide to act. Not later, not tomorrow, but now. In the quiet spaces of your day, there are tasks left undone, projects paused, promises made to the self but not fulfilled. And these fragments, they seem small, they seem forgettable, but over time they become the weight you carry, a kind of invisible clutter that clouds your focus, dims your energy, and erodes your confidence. Because unfinished work is not just about time, it is about identity. Every time you begin something and walk away before its completion, you are training your mind to tolerate inconsistency, to become comfortable with, almost to normalize the breaking of inner contracts. And that normalization becomes a quiet voice, a subtle belief that you are someone who does not finish, and that belief slowly infiltrates your decisions, your posture, your energy, your sense of worth. The habit of pushing yourself to finish what you start is not about perfection. It is not about obsession with results. It is about becoming someone you can rely on. It is about integrity. The kind of inner alignment where your actions match your intentions, where your efforts are not scattered but grounded, where your time is not wasted in a loop of restarts, but invested in closure to finish something, even something small, is to remind yourself that you are capable of follow through, that your word to yourself carries weight, and that your life is not a collection of beginnings but a story of completions. Every open loop you leave behind takes a piece of your presence. It becomes a background process, a mental tab left open consuming energy even when you think you have moved on. But when you finish, when you close the loop, when you say this is done, not perfectly but fully, you free yourself, you return your attention to the present, you build a rhythm that is rooted in forward motion, not in fragments. You do not need to finish everything today, but you do need to finish what today has asked of you, not because someone is watching, not because a reward is guaranteed, but because you said you would, and that promise is sacred. If you keep breaking your own word, you will find yourself needing more and more motivation just to move, because you have unconsciously learned that your intentions mean nothing. But when you follow through, something shifts deep inside. It is subtle but powerful. It is the quiet growth of trust, not with others, but with yourself. And that trust becomes your edge and your advantage. the reason you keep showing up, even when no one applauds, even when the results are slow, even when your emotions say, stop. Discipline is not about pressure, it is about clarity. It is the understanding that your present action shapes your future freedom. And so the choice to finish becomes more than a task, it becomes a declaration. I am not here to begin endlessly. I am here to build. I am not here to start and pause and start again. I am here to close the loop, to complete the process, to become whole in my efforts. When you start something, finish it. When you say yes to a task, give it your full presence. When you make a plan, do not just begin with excitement and with honor. This habit builds momentum. It trains your nervous system to feel the satisfaction of closure instead of the anxiety of incompletion, and that satisfaction carries you it, uplifts your state. It clears your space. It reminds you that you are not fragmented but whole, that you are not drifting, but deciding life does not reward the ones who start the most. It rewards the ones who finish the most. Because finishing is a skill. It is a mindset. It is a commitment to being more than a dreamer, to being a doer, to being someone who does not rely on excitement but on execution. And that kind of person does not wait for perfect conditions. They begin, they continue, and they complete. Even when it is boring, even when it is hard, even when it is quiet, you become that person. Not all at once, but one decision at a time. So today, choose one thing, finish it, do it fully, do it cleanly, not rushed, not sloppy, but with the kind of care that says, here I chose this, I brought it to completion. That is not just a task, that is transformation. There is a sacredness to your energy that most people never learn to protect. They give it away in small pieces to the urgent, to the unimportant, to the voices that demand, but do not uplift. And over time, they forget that their life is not determined by how much they do, but by how intentionally they choose what not to do. The habit of saying no to things that drain your energy is not about avoidance or selfishness. It is about alignment. It is about remembering that you are a finite vessel and that what you allow into your field becomes part of what you carry, what you think, what you feel, and who you become. You see, not every conversation is worth your peace. Not every invitation is worth your time. Not every habit deserves space in the day. The world will not teach you this, because the world thrives on your attention. It profits from your distraction. It grows fat on your exhaustion. So you must learn to say no, not later, not when you are already depleted, but now early with grace, with clarity, with calm strength. Because every yes that is not true becomes a quiet betrayal of the self. You must begin to ask, not just is this good or bad, but does this serve me? Does this grow me? Does this align with the life I am quietly building? Within me, most people do not burn out because they are doing too much. They burn out because they are doing too much. That does not matter too much. That drains too much. That divides them from their true path. And so they live in a quiet fatigue, not of the body, but in the soul. A kind of emotional debt that grows with every unguarded. Yes, if you want clarity, you must remove the clutter. If you want depth, you must reject the distractions. If you want peace, you must create boundaries. Not walls, not isolation, but clear chosen limits that say, this is where I give, and this is where I preserve. Boundaries are not lines drawn in anger, they are lines drawn in self-respect. They are the architecture of a life that flows instead of floods. And this architecture requires discernment. It requires that you listen to your own internal signals, that heaviness, that tension, that reluctance. Those are not weaknesses, they are messages. They are signals from your deeper self that something is not aligned. Do not ignore them. Do not silence them with obligation or guilt. Instead, honor them. Trust that your inner world knows what drains you, even when your mind tries to rationalize it. You cannot say yes to your highest calling if your calendar is filled with what pulls you downward. And so you must begin to curate your life like an artist who chooses each color with care, not because all colors are bad, but because only certain shades belong in this painting. Your energy is the brush, and every day you paint your existence with how you spend it. So spend it wisely, not out of fear, but out of devotion to what matters most. The people who respect your boundaries will remain. Those who resist them were never in harmony with your path to begin with. And that is not loss, that is refinement. Not every connection must be kept. Not every habit must be maintained. Not every opportunity must be taken. Some things you outgrow, some people you evolve past, some routines you must retire in order to ascend. Saying no is how. You carve space for the yes that matters, for the yes that energizes, for the yes that feels like truth. Saying no is not rejection, it is redirection. It is the decision to conserve your strength for the battles worth fighting the path, projects worth building the relationships worth nurturing. And if you do not learn this, you will wake one day wondering why you are always tired, why your progress feels slow, why your joy feels dull, and the answer will not be found in doing more, but in doing less, with more focus, more clarity, more soul. So today, begin the practice of saying no, not with harshness, but with grace, not with guilt, but with conviction. Because you are not here to please, you are here to align. And alignment sometimes sounds like no. No to what pulls you away. No to what leaves you empty, no to what demands more than it gives. And in that no, you will find a deeper yes. A yes to peace, a yes to purpose, a yes to a life. Lived not in fragments, but in full deliberate presence. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled, yet most walk through life letting the fire flicker, letting the light grow dim under the weight of repetition, of distraction, of the illusion that knowing is something to complete instead of something to continue. But to rewire your mindset is to reawaken the mind, to treat each day as a classroom where the teacher is not always a person, but often a moment, a question, a realization that interrupts your certainty and invites you into deeper. Seeing the habit of learning one new thing each day is not about collecting facts. It is about sharpening perception. It is about stretching your awareness beyond the boundary of what you already understand, because what you think you know is not the whole sky, it is a single star. And wisdom begins where certainty ends. You must become a student not of school, but of life, of thought, of your own mind, and the way it resists new information, the way it clings to old patterns. Not because they are true, but because they are familiar, and comfort is the enemy of mental evolution. Your thinking shapes everything, the decisions you make, the emotions you feel, the goals you pursue. And if your thinking is dull, reactive, repetitive, then your life will mirror that dullness. And you will move through each day, not as a conscious being, but as a collection of habits. Never questioned, never challenged, never awakened. But when you decide to learn, when you feed your mind something useful, something rich, something that makes you pause and reconsider, you begin to chip away at the walls of automatic thought. You begin to sculpt a sharper self, not a smarter self in the traditional sense, but a more conscious one, a self that observes its own stories and asks if they still serve, if they ever did. Learning is not about consuming, it is about refining. It is about walking into a situation and seeing more, not because the world changed, but because your lens became clearer, and that clarity becomes your power. In conversation, in conflict, in decision, in silence, the more you learn, the less you react. The more you respond, the more you listen, the less you assume. And that space between reaction and response is where freedom lives. Imagine how different your life would feel if you approached every day with curiosity instead of conclusion. If you said, what can I learn today that sharpens me, that stretches me, that humbles me? Because humility is the soil in which wisdom grows, and only those who admit they do not everything are able to learn. Anything you do not need to spend hours reading, you do not need to enroll in courses, you simply need to listen with intention, observe with openness, reflect with honesty. A new insight can come from a book, or from the way a stranger holds the door. It can come from a mistake you made or a pattern you finally notice. It does not matter where it comes from. What matters is that you stay open, that you remain willing to upgrade your mental framework, not just for success, but for clarity, for peace, for deeper presence. Learning is how you clean the lens of perception, how you update the internal maps that guide your every move. And when those maps are outdated, you get lost, even in familiar places. But when they are current, when they are alive with fresh insight, you move with confidence, not the confidence of arrogance, but of alignment. You are not guessing, you are growing. And that growth gives you grace. Grace in how you speak, how you think, how you hold yourself in moments of pressure. Most people stop learning because they think it is no longer required. But life is a series of changing terrains, and the map that worked yesterday might lead you in circles today. So learn, because it is sacred, learn. because it is fuel, learn. Because it is the quiet rebellion against mental stagnation, you do not have to be perfect. You only have to be present enough to notice when you are wrong, and wise enough to update your direction when you are, and that wisdom is not a destination, it is a discipline, a habit, a way of life that says, I will not be ruled by my past conclusions. I will not assume I have reached the edge of understanding. I will remain curious. I will remain teachable. I will remain awake, because the world is always offering you lessons, but only the willing will receive them. So become one who receives. Become one who seeks not knowledge for its own sake, but for the clarity it brings to everything you touch, everything you choose, everything you are. There is an ancient intelligence living within the body, one that does not speak in words, but in signals, in energy, in rhythm. And too often we forget that our emotional state is not just a function of thoughts, but of physical stillness. How, if you sit, how you breathe, how you move or fail to move, shapes the landscape of your mind. You cannot think your way out of every low mood, because some moods are not made of thoughts, they are made of stagnation. The habit of moving, when your mind begins to sink, is not about fitness or exercise. It is about alignment. It is about honoring the truth that your mind and body are not separate, but reflections of one another. And when you stay still in sorrow, when you freeze in fear, when you collapse into your own weight, you are sending a message to your nervous system that this is where you will remain. And so you remain not because you are stuck, but because you did not move. The body is your anchor, but it is also your key when your emotions begin to spiral. You do not need to analyze, you need to shift. Shift the energy, not with force, but with awareness. Stretch, breathe, stand, walk open your chest, loosen your jaw, soften your shoulders, change your posture, and you will change the signal when you move with intention. You disrupt the pattern of descent, not with denial, but with permission. You are not suppressing emotion. You are redirecting its flow, giving it space to breathe, to move through you instead of root inside you. Most people wait for motivation to begin. But the truth is, movement precedes motivation. Energy does not come from thought alone. It comes from circulation, from motion, from breaking the inertia that holds you in place. The mind loves to predict, to anticipate, to repeat. But the body lives in presence, and movement is presence in motion. It brings you back to the now, back to the breath, back to the feeling that you are not frozen, you are flowing. Your emotional state is not fixed, it is fluid. But you must stir the waters. You must initiate the shift. Do not wait for the heaviness to pass. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Get up, move, open the window, take 10 steps, stretch your spine, roll your shoulders, walk around the block, or simply sway with your breath. Do not underestimate these small acts. They are not trivial. They are the quiet rituals that return you to vitality, because depression often begins as disconnection. Disconnection from self, from sensation, from the simple act of being in your body. And the more you ignore that body, the more it weighs on you like a forgotten instrument out of tune. But when you begin to move even gently, even slowly, you start to tune again. You start to wake again. You start to remind yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are not your mood. You are the awareness beneath it. And that awareness has choice, always. It can choose to stay in the fog or to take one step into clarity, and then another. And then another movement is not a solution, but it is a beginning, a doorway, a bridge between despair and direction. You do not need to dance through life, but you do need to dance through the moments that try to hold you captive in stillness, because motion is the language of freedom. And every time you choose it, you affirm that you are still in charge of your state. Even when your mind forgets, your body remembers. And when you let it lead, your mind will often follow. You must trust this. Trust the wisdom of walking. Trust the clarity of a changed perspective. Trust the momentum of moving through resistance. Not around it, not above it, but through it. You are not here to be static. You are here to flow, to shift, to respond, to participate in your own experience and movement. Is your way of saying, I am here. I am alive. I am not giving in to the weight of this moment. I am rising through it, not with noise, not with force, but with the quiet decision to move again and again and again until the weight lifts, until the fog clears, until you remember that you are not trapped. You are transitioning, and every step is part of your becoming. There is a quiet wisdom in reflection, a kind of soft mirror held up to the self, not to judge, but to understand, not to criticize, but to clarify. Most people reach the end of the day with exhaustion, but not insight. They fall into sleep as a way of escape rather than a return to peace. because they have not learned the sacred habit of pausing, of turning inward, and asking what improved today. This is not a question of performance or perfection. It is a question of presence, participation, of intentional becoming every day as a teacher. But only if you stop long enough to listen. And the way you listen is by looking not at what you failed to do, not at what went wrong, not at the noise of the unfinished, but at the subtle movements, the shifts, the changes, however small, however quiet. Because growth is not always loud. Sometimes it is a breath taken before reacting. Sometimes it is choosing patience over panic. Sometimes it is the decision to begin again. When everything in you wanted to give up. And if you do not stop to notice these things, they slip away, they dissolve into the blur of routine, and you begin to feel like nothing is working when in truth things are shifting. You are evolving, just not loudly, not dramatically, but gradually. And gradually is how roots grow, how mountains form, how character is built. The practice of asking what improved is not about chasing achievements. It is about cultivating awareness. It is about reconnecting with your own process. So, you do not lose faith in it. When results come slowly or arrive in forms you did not expect, this practice takes no more than 5 minutes. A still room, a journal, a quiet thought before bed, and a question, where did I improve today? Maybe you managed your time with more focus. Maybe you said no where you used to say yes. Maybe you noticed an old habit before it controlled you. Maybe you extended compassion when judgment would have been easier. Maybe you simply showed up despite the weight on your shoulders. These are victories, but they are invisible until you name them, until you bring them into light and claim them as part of your unfolding. Do not let the pace of the world make you forget. The pace of your own becoming reflection is how you root your progress in memory, how you remind yourself that even on days when the world does not applaud, you can still applaud yourself because you know what you carried, you know what you chose, and choosing is what matters. The act of looking back is how you build momentum forward, because what is seen is remembered, and what is remembered is reinforced, and what is reinforced becomes identity. You do not become stronger by accident. You become stronger by seeing your own strength and trusting it enough to carry for it into tomorrow. Most people are caught in the loop of doing but never witnessing. And so they lose connection to why they started. They become mechanical efficient but numb. The reflection brings you back to soul. It softens the edges. It renews your direction, and it allows you to adjust without shame, without pressure, just clarity. The clarity of knowing that even in the chaos there is movement, even in the struggle there is shaping, and even in the stillness there is progress. The point is not to be proud or disappointed. The point is to be honest. What improved today? What needs attention? What can I carry forward? And what can I leave behind? This simple rhythm practice consistently becomes a compass, a way of keeping your inner world aligned with your outer efforts. Because success without reflection is noise and failure. Without reflection is shame. But both with reflection become wisdom. And wisdom is the soil of transformation. So tonight, before you close your eyes, before you enter the forgetting of sleep, take a breath, take a pause, take a look, not for flaws, but for truth. And in that truth, find the thread of your progress, however thin, however fragile it is, yours, and it is real. And tomorrow it will grow stronger. There is a moment in every transformation when the new way still feels foreign, when the past still feels uncertain, when the habit still requires effort, and it is in that moment that most people stop. Not because the change is impossible, because they misunderstand the discomfort. They think it means they are failing. They think it means they are not made for this. But discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of rewiring, of realignment, of becoming someone new. And newness is never effortless at first. The habit feels heavy, awkward, unnatural, like learning a new language or walking on unfamiliar terrain. But if you stop too soon, you will always remain at the threshold, never crossing fully into the identity you were. Building the habit never becomes natural because it was never given the chance to root, to deepen, to settle. Most people live in a cycle of starting and stopping, excited, then uncertain, then distracted, then back to the old familiar, not because they lack the will, but because they lack the patience, the persistence, the quiet trust that says this too will become second nature. If I just stay with it long enough, you do not need more motivation. You need more repetition, more consistency, more presence within the process. Habits are not built by feeling. They are built by doing again and again, until the doing becomes being, until the action becomes part of how you live. Rather than something you try to remember, this is the truth you must hold. If you want to rewire your mindset, real change is not built in bursts. It is built in rhythm, not in fireworks, but in footsteps, in the quiet consistency of choosing again today and then again tomorrow and then again the next, until the decision no longer feels like a decision, until it becomes the air you breathe, the way you walk, the way you move through your day without needing to talk yourself into it each time. Think of brushing your teeth. You do not wake up and ask if you feel motivated to do it. You just do it because it has become part of your identity. And that is the goal with any habit, not to force it forever, but to stay with it long enough that it carries you. Even when your willpower is low, this is not glamorous work. It is not dramatic. It does not always give immediate rewards, but it is the most sacred kind of work, the kind that reshapes your default, the kind that makes the right choice easier over time, not because life got easier, but because you did not abandon the process too. Early, every time you repeat a habit, you reinforce a neural pathway, and that pathway becomes smoother, clearer, more automatic with time. But you must keep walking it, even when it feels slow, even when the results are not visible, even when the world is distracted with speed and noise. You must remember that depth takes time, and depth is what you are after. You are not building habits for applause. You are building them for alignment, for integrity, for the kind of strength that does not collapse under pressure, because it is rooted in daily devotion. Habits are not chains. They are keys. Keys to freedom, keys to clarity, keys to the life you say you want. And if you let them, they will carry you through storms, through seasons, through silence, but only if you give them time to take hold. Do not quit because it still feels difficult. That is the nature of transition. Do not stop because no one sees what you are doing. This is for you, not for them. And do not expect to feel ease immediately. Ease comes after endurance, after effort, after enough repetitions that the body begins to believe, the mind begins to accept, and the soul begins to trust that this new way is no longer new. It is you. So keep going, not because you must, but because you may, because you have chosen this path, not as a punishment, but as a liberation. And every time you show up, every time you repeat the habit, no matter how small you are, casting a vote for the kind of person you are becoming, you are saying, I am not ruled by mood or delay or resistance. I am ruled by my vision, and that vision lives through my habits. When the motivation fades, when the excitement quiets, when the noise dies down, what remains is your discipline. And if you stay long enough, the discipline becomes your identity. The habit becomes your nature, and the life you once imagined becomes the life you quietly live, not because it was easy, but because you refused to walk away before it felt natural. Your mindset is the sum of your habits, not your hopes. And the way to rewire it is not through occasional motivation, but through daily commitment. You wake up with purpose, not as a luxury, but as a necessity, because every day spent drifting is a day surrendered to randomness. You plan your time before the world pulls you in 100 directions, because your energy is too sacred to be scattered. You learn to speak to yourself with the same respect you give others, because your inner voice becomes your outer identity. You take action the moment. Delay whispers, because hesitation is the enemy of transformation. You finish what you start, not for the outcome, but to strengthen the integrity between who you say you are and how you act. You protect your energy by saying no to what drains you, because your peace is the foundation of your progress. You nourish your mind daily with new ideas, because sharp thinking protects you from shallow decisions. You move your body to shift your state, because stillness in low moods becomes stagnation. You reflect each night to recognize growth, because unnoticed growth is easily abandoned, and you stick with good habits until they feel natural, because that is when discipline turns into identity. The real question is, which of these 10 habits will you choose to start with today, and why? Share it in the comments. I'm truly grateful you're here. If this helped you, please like and subscribe so I can keep making more just like it.